Well, hello, welcome again to the introduction to New Testament Greek grammar. And I got up to sheet 5. So make sure, of course, that you've mastered all the material in the first 4 sections. I'd like to begin with some reading practice, just to practice our letters and so on. So, into cosmo, ain. By the way, notice again the little iota subscripts down the bottom here. You must write them in, but they're not pronounced. In earlier Greek it would have been entoi, but by New Testament times it's just ento. Ento cosmo ein, kai ho cosmos di autou egeneto, kai ho cosmos auton uk egno, kai ho logos sax egeneto, kai es genosen, en heimin kai ethia samatha. Break it up into syllables. Ethia samatha tan doxan autou. So it's from John's Gospel. It simply means he was in the world, and the world was made diautou through him, and the world did not know him. And the Word became sarx flesh, and eskenosen he dwelt. Some old translations say tabernacled, because skene was a noun, skene meaning a tent, among us, and we beheld his glory. You can see that perhaps in the little root in here, it's cognate with our word theatre, where you see things. So we beheld his glory. Anyway, you can have a practice through reading through just to get used to the letters. Now, in the previous sheet, we looked at the second declension masculine nouns ending in os, and we looked at the accusative and the nominative. So we looked at anthropos, a man; anthropon was the accusative; anthropoi was the plural; and anthropos was the accusative plural. We're going to now do the other 2 cases. Greek has 4 cases. There's technically 5. There's another one called the vocative. It's when you use when you're yelling out at somebody. It's not that common, and we might come across it in our travels, but it's not going to make a big deal of that, and I won't include it in the lists of the cases. So for our benefit, there are 4 cases: nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. The genitive case limits the noun and is often used to denote possession. For example, ho ophthalmos to anthropou means the eye, the ophthalmos. Now this is the genitive of the man, to anthropou. The dative case has the basic meaning of 2 or 4. So in the sentence, he gives the ball to the boy, the ball would be in the accusative, to the boy would be put into the dative case in Greek. So genitive, think of it as of at the moment, and the dative 2 or 4. Now both of these cases do have other usages as well, partly because in Indo-European, from which Greek descended, it has a lot more cases. It's got locatives and instrumentals and ablatives, and these all got compressed down to the genitive and dative, so they sometimes have other usages as well in Greek. Now, a noun in the dative case is also known as the indirect object, as compared with the direct object, which is in the accusative case. Now, here are the endings. For the singular, and this is only for masculine second declension nouns ending in os, the genitive is anthropou, and the dative is anthropo. Notice the little iota subscript. You must write it, but you don't pronounce it, but it's very important. And anthropon in the genitive plural, and anthropos. So this will mean of a man, to or for a man; of men, to or for men. Now, if you're worried about accents and things, you might have noticed that it's anthropos with the accent on the alpha in the nominative, and then suddenly it becomes anthropou. The accent moves. It's because you've got a long diphthong here. In all of these ones, you've got long long vowels or diphthongs, and it pulls the accent back into or pulls the accent forward in the word. The corresponding words for the, this is the definite article, are, we've already had hot and ton, and now we get to and toe. These are easy to learn because they're the same endings as in the nouns. And then similarly here, tone and toice, and it's easy because it's the same endings as in the nouns. Some examples. Hot adelphos to anthropou eke misthon to diakono. The brother of the man has misthon, a reward for the servant. Another example here with the dative. Helios kalos anthropos estin. We haven't done estin, but that's the word for is. We haven't done a lot of the vocabulary here. We'll get to these words. Helios is the sun. Is kalos is a word for good or noble, perhaps just good here. Anthropos for men, or for mankind, if you will. So the sun is good for men. So while we're there, estin is estin is part of the verb to be, so estin simply means is. It takes the same case for both its subject and object, as we saw up here. The sun is, that's nominative, is kalos, is good, that's nominative. This verb is irregular. The first person singular is ami, which means I am. And it's one of the few verbs in the New Testament, at least, which don't end in omega. This ends in me. And there are a relatively small number of these me verbs in New Testament Greek. There are a lot more in classical Greek and a lot more again in Homeric Greek. But in the New Testament we have ami, I am. If you know any Latin, you might know that the corresponding word in Latin is sum, original summi. Sum in Latin is the only me verb, and the i's dropped out in Latin, but it comes from an original me verb. Okay, plural participles. We've seen that you can add a nu on the end, and it turns the verb into a participle. So we saw that luon means loosing, but this form can only be used in the singular, present singular, masculine, nominative participle. It can only be used with a singular, masculine, nominative noun. The corresponding plural participle, that is, plural masculine nominative participle, is luontes. So luon becomes luontes. Now for the eo verbs we have a contraction. So for example, philuntes was original phileontes, becomes philuntes, and that means loving, but you can only use it as a masculine nominative plural. So for example, anthropoi philuntes ton cosmon misousin ton Christon. Men loving the world, so this is plural, and so this is the plural participle. Men loving the world hate the Messiah. Now the name Jesus, because it's coming from a Semitic word, it declines somewhat irregularly. It's not too bad. It's Jesus is in the nominative, Yesun in the accusative, Yesu in the genitive. These are sort of what you might expect. But then the dative is the same as the genitive. So you can only tell the difference by context. Now vocabulary, I'm going through lots of vocabulary here. Jesus, I've just mentioned, is the name for Jesus. Iakobos, notice pronunciation here, Iakobos is James, where we get our word Jacob from. The iota becomes a J in English. So this is James or Jacob. Hamatolos is the word for sinner. This is a hard word to remember. Hamatolos is the word for sinner. I don't know of any English words to correspond to it. Anemos is the word for wind. you might have heard of an anemometer, anemometer, I should say, which measures wind force, wind speed. Artos, a difficult word because I've got no English word. Artos is the word for bread, can also mean a loaf. Diabolos, the word for devil. In fact, our word devil is just a corruption of this, diabolos. It's connected with a verb, diaballo, which means to slander, or to abuse somebody, or to slander them, to give false information against them. So that, or to make accusation against. And so that Old Testament idea of Satan as the accuser becomes a diabolos, becomes the devil. Doulos, word for slave, can also mean servant. As to what level of slave, I'll leave that to the commentators to discuss. It depends on the context and the book, exactly what this means. In some cases, doulos can be used in the sense of a devotee, but it's in classical Greek, it's just the word for a slave, someone who was owned by someone else and had to do their bidding. The helios is the word for sun, I mentioned before. A cognate with our word helium. Karpos is the word for fruit. Don't know of any English form of this. Karpos, fruit. Can be used literally of fruit, can be used metaphorically as well, as it is in the New Testament. Misthos, the word for reward or pay. Misthos. Naos, a temple or shrine. We'll see some other words for temple, but this is the holier part of the temple. It's the innermost part. The naos is the holy part, the innermost part, the shrine of the temple. Oikos, house. It's cognate with the with economics or oikonomics. Looking after your household is economics. So oikos is the word for house. And oinos is cognate with our word wine, Latin vinum. Originally there was a W in front of this, a digamma, which disappeared very early in Greek. So the word was originally oinos, hence our word wine, and then the W disappeared, you just get oinos. Same with oikos, there was a W in front, which you can see from Latin. Uranos, the word for heaven. Uranos, heaven. Originally Uranos was one of the ancient Greek gods, father of Zeus, I think. Oklos is the word for crowd. There's a word ochlocracy, which is mob rule. Perasmos, temptation. That's a difficult one. Perasmos, temptation, can also mean testing. Staros, the word for cross. Staros, the word for cross. Huios, which I have mentioned before, but check the pronunciation carefully. It's huios. Huios is the word for sun. Kairos is a time or season. Much written about this word. It's an interesting word in the New Testament, used in various meanings. Kairos, a word for time or season. Chronos is the word for time. This is temporal time. Now, these next three, I put a little F in next to them. I'll explain that in a minute. There's eremos, meaning desert or wilderness. Hodos, meaning a way or a path or a road. This can be used with a range of meanings, including figuratively. And parthenos, well, you know the word hodometer, perhaps it measures how far you've gone. Parthenos, a word for a virgin or young maiden. Now the reason these have got F's next to them is because although they're second declension nouns ending in os, these three are grammatically feminine. This one's obviously feminine because it's a young maiden. These ones are connected with the earth. Anything connected with the earth is generally feminine in Greek. So even though it ends in these end in os, they are feminine nouns. So at this stage you can't use the word for thee with these three, because we haven't done the feminine form of the word for thee yet. When we get to adjectives also, you'll have to put a feminine adjective with these three. There are other such ones as well. They're not that many in the New Testament, but there's enough of them. Okay, some sentences. What I suggest you do with this, I'm going to do these fairly quickly, and then you might like to go back and see if you can translate them yourself, and then you can check by replaying the video. Hoi angeloi lalus in logus anthropos. The angels speak words to men, or for men. Ho adelphos Iakobu agron karpu eke. The brother of James, there's the genitive. Now we need a verb. We've got to go to the end of the sentence to find a verb, so it's jigsaw puzzles. You've got to look carefully at each, read the entire sentence through. So the brother of James has agron, a field, it's accusative, karpu, genitive, of fruit. So a field consisting of fruit, perhaps. Hoi apostoloi tsetus in misthon to doulo. The apostles seek misthon, a reward, to doulo, there's the dative, for the slave. Hode Christos ginoske tus logus anthropon. But, there's our but the Christ or the Messiah knows the words of men, genitive plural. U tsetusin tus tu diabolu huius. Now you'll notice here that the tus goes grammatically with the huius. These go together, but they've been separated because there's a little genitive phrase in the middle here. So they do not seek the sons of the devil. This one's a question. Oikos theou naos estin. So is a house of God a temple or a shrine? Or you could say, is a shrine a house of God? The word order is quite fluid. Ginoskomen de ton chiron tu thanatu. But we know the season or time of death. Question again. Heuriskete parthenon. Are you seeking, from heurisko, this is second person plural, are you seeking a maiden? Theoro ton doulon kuriou. I see the slave of the Lord, or perhaps of the master. Can have either meaning. Interestingly, in the Septuagint, kurios, just by itself with no definite article, with no word for thee, is generally the way they translate Yahweh from the Hebrew. Jesus sodze tus hamatolus tu cosmu kai therapue tona delphon. Jesus saves the sinners of the world, accusative plural, genitive singular, and he heals the brother. Now, participle here, krinontes tus anthropus hoi pharisaioi missus in ton kurion. So it's a plural participle. It's going to be agreeing with the nominative here, hoi pharisaioi. So judging the men, the Pharisees hate the Lord. Or you could say, the Pharisees hate the Lord, judging the men, or because they judge the men. Various ways of paraphrasing. Probably best at this stage to do it literally. Judging the men, the Pharisees hate the Lord. U philuntes theon hoi hamatoloi u ginoskus in tus kairus. Now, again, I'm a bit naughty there. That should be a may there. When you're negating in the New Testament, you can have with a participle in classical Greek, but in New Testament Greek, I better be correct here. If you negate a participle, you do it with may. This is an alternative negation. That's what they use in the New Testament. So, not loving God, the sinners do not know the seasons. Not loving God, the sinners do not know the seasons. Misuntes ton Christon phileti ton cosmon. Hating, participle again, and it's plural because the subject is second person plural. Hating the Messiah, you are loving the world. Hoi de douloi tsetus in ton oikon tu theou, but the slaves are seeking the house of God. Now it's got a the there. We don't say of the God, we say of God, but Greek will often put the article, definite article, and you don't translate it in English. Ho oklos huriskon ton kurion ite arton. The crowd, finding the Lord, they ask for bread. Now remember that oklos is crowd. It's singular in Greek, but it has a plural sense in English. So it's the crowd it asks for, but we would say they ask for, because it's a crowd in English is plural. So the crowd seeking the Lord we just say ask for bread, be the easiest way around that. Hotu Christus staros philos anthropos. Now you've got a hot, and it's got to go with a noun in the nominative. So you go along, there's the one with the os. And you've got this little genitive phrase in the middle. So it's the cross of the Messiah. Now there's no verb in this sentence, so you've got to supply the verb is. This is very common in Greek. They'll often leave out the verb to be. So the cross of the Messiah, or of the Christ, understand is philos, a friend, anthropos, 2 or 4 men. Ho oikos to Israel, tere ton nomon al u phile ton theon. The house of Israel keeps the law, but does not love God. Hoi iudaioi me philuntes ton Christon poiusin staron. Again, I've corrected that u to a me there. Again, I have to emphasize the New Testament uses iudaioi in the sense of the Jewish leaders. It's not the Jewish race. So the Jewish leaders not loving the Messiah, they make a cross. Hoi anthropoi tus doulos teruntes blasphemusin. The men keeping, there's a participle, the men keeping the slaves blaspheme. Theoreti hodus kai eremus, question. Are you looking at the roads and the deserts? Or are you looking at roads and deserts? I should say, there's no the there. Are you looking at roads and deserts? Question. Now, as I suggested, you go back through those, see if you can write out your own, you might just pause it and see if you can write out your own translations of those, and then you can go back and check by re-listening to the video to make sure you got it all right. Similarly with this little passage here, to get away from just sentences, I made up a silly little passage here just to practice our grammar. Jesus blepon ton laon lege auto. Now, by the way, notice here you've got a little dot above here. That's a semicolon. A Greek does a semicolon, that's a dot and a comma, by using a single dot. So we've already seen we use our semicolon is a question mark, and is used as a question mark, and our semicolon, which is written like that, is written like that in Greek. So I'll read it out first. Jesus blepon ton laon lege auto, ukrino ton cosmon alasodzo ton cosmon, didasko setus logus tu theou, kai akues autus. Hoi anthropoi u ginoskus intus logus tu kuriou, ala hoi apostoloi pistuus into Christo, kai sodze autus ectu diabolu. Now, hopefully in some time you'll be able to read perhaps as quickly as that. So Jesus seeing, participle, the people, lege, he says, auto, we would say to them. It's actually singular agreeing with laon, but this means to them, or to it perhaps, if you want to make the crowd it. So Jesus, seeing the crowd, says to it, "U krino, I do not judge ton cosmon the world, alla but sozo I save the world." Didasco set. Now we haven't had set, but set means you singular. I teach you, in the accusative, I teach you the words of God, and you do not hear autus them. We haven't had that either yet. I'm going to introduce various words as we go. So, I teach you the words of God, and you do not hear them. The men do not know the words of the Lord, but the apostles. Now, pistuo is a verb meaning to believe, and it takes a dative case. That means the noun, what you believe in, has to go into the dative. But the apostles believe the Messiah, and he saves, change of subject here, he saves autus them, ectu diabolu, from the devil. So that is the end of the chapter 5.